Sorry. Maybe we look at whom do we have on the other side, Mr. Wheeler? Okay. So from this end, I think Simon and I, but I see Jonathan is joined. I had Wheeler speaking. Who else is on this call? So that probably we take the roll call.
I think Sarah is on the call. Sarah is from this side, from Indiana.
Okay. Thank you. So probably begin. The first agenda item is this call is to spell out the roadmap for the 2015. So probably maybe I will talk about the first, and then Willa will talk about the second, and Simon will talk about the third, and then probably we'll share any comments, ideas, and what else we want to share. So the first one is the HTML form entry module. Basically, this is the module that some actually utilize to develop the oncology point of care. And I'm not so sure whether we were to look at the HTML form entry module as it is, or also incorporate what we've been doing with some with regard to the oncology. So basically, yesterday with Sam, we spent the whole day at the AMPATH Center. We worked with him, we tested most of the forms for the oncology. We went through them, correcting a few logic errors here and there, and the forms worked very fine. This morning, it was actually to move those forms into the test server. We have a test server that the form test server, because the normal test server is not yet up by today. So it was to move these forms to the form test server for further testing. Unfortunately, today, as he was coming, he got an accident and is at St. Luke's Hospital. But I hope he's doing well now. So, but the module so far, if we look at HTML form entry from like whether we can implement the oncology, at least by yesterday I learned from some, I saw a number of things, and I think it's a good module. Maybe I would leave this to Willa to tell us maybe on maybe the perspective under which he put this agenda item, whether it's just the HTML form entry itself, whether we need to make some changes to make it work for us, but I've actually shared what we had in regard to college.
Okay, thank you, Alfaro. Okay, so basically, I think these are two separate issues. So I put that agenda up there because I was just hoping we could have some kind of discussion of what we're intending to be doing for this year, especially following the discussion we had on Monday on the management call. Yeah, so there are some things which are going on right now, and there is a proposal about the kind of projects which we will be, or we are hoping to be doing for this year, and that include we are hoping that we will be developing a point of care system, and there are various approaches to that, but so far it seems like we're inclined on using AngularJS. And also, apart from that, there was a discussion on whether we can employ the HTML form entry so that we move all our forms from the form entry module to use HTML form entry. And that way, we'll be able to use the forms even on other devices like the Android tablets. that's why I put that module there as one of the discussion. So far, with this issue, I'm working with the HTML form entry team. That is mostly Mark Goodrich of PIH, and we're trying to solve some of the issues that were raised regarding this module. And hopefully, by the end of this week, we'll be in position to say whether we can use the module the way we want or not. But I hope we'll be able to use it. Yeah, the other thing that we are planning to do is actually, if you look at the agenda items there, the second thing on that, the second sub item on that first item is remote form entry module. I put it there because yesterday, no, not yesterday, that was Monday. I had a discussion with Buck regarding on how we can improve remote form entry to eliminate these kind of errors we are currently facing at AMPATH, whereby the IT team has to do a lot of things manually in order to get the remote sites up to date. So basically, there are some suggestions, and that is to we already had this discussion before, but yeah, I'll bring it up again, and that is to make the remote form entry, instead of just intercepting the calls to create encounters and observation in the remote sites, we'll have it intercept, put the forms in the queue, and then let the processing happen on the remote site so that the data will be available on the remote site, and then later on, when those files in the remote form entry queue are brought to the central server, they'll be processed and we'll have the data there too. We have seen some of the challenges regarding that, and that is at some point we are expecting that the two sites will be deviating from each other, because you can have things like data cleaning happening at the central that won't be able to be transferred to the remote sites, because you have, in some cases, we are using what we call internal IDs, which will not match up. So, and Bark suggested that one of the way to solve that problem, since we expect that whenever we're doing some data cleaning on the central, we don't think that for one site, there will be a lot of patients that have been affected. So if it appears that for in a month, twice or once, you are sending a list of 10 patients or maybe 20 for which you want some changes to be applied to them, that should be fine. And that is compared to what is happening right now, because the IT team has to do a lot of work just to make things in line between central and the remote sites. Yeah, and I also put Mozilla there because I think Simon is supposed to be working on Mozilla, and I was hoping maybe we could have a kind of a general discussion and see how we can work together to enable the work that is supposed to be happening on Mozilla to happen the way it is supposed to be happening. Yeah, well, so those are the few things that we have discussion about. And since Jonathan is here, and he's the one who is pushing forward the proposal and the budget for this, maybe he can add something in order to, the idea here is to just make the whole team understand what we are looking forward to do, as opposed to just sitting around waiting for the problems, and then later on somebody comes up with some project like, okay, now we're supposed to be doing this. I was just thinking it's better if we can be on the same page. All of us as a team, we know that, okay, this year we have the 3 items which are priority, apart from other issues which we have to deal in our day-to-day activities. So basically that's it. Any views or contribution, that will be fine. On the other hand, we can discuss about oncology module. I already added that as an agenda, because that is a separate thing and it is happening on, it's kind of independent in a way, although it is using HTML form entry. Yeah, but the context in which this HTML form entry sub item is here is not related to oncology module. It's just independent. It is related to the discussion we had about using it for, like I already pointed out. So yeah. So welcome guys, and let's have your views.
Thanks, Willa. Can I just jump in, not to detour from where you were going, but I don't know who Simon is. Simon, it's nice to meet you. I'm JJ.
Thank you.
Willa, maybe you can tell us what Simon's role will be.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Let me.
Simon, that's what I just wanted to say. You're here, so you can say it yourself.
Yes. As you heard, I'm a member in the team. Barely about 3 weeks ago, and so far I have been introduced to Mzima, which would be my core work. I'm working with Ada. Today she couldn't be part of this call for some reasons. I think she sent an apology. So right now I'm getting to understand where Mzima is, and I'm helping him resolve issues and
Okay. I don't know if other people are having the same problem, but it's very hard to hear Alfayo and you, Simon. Is it just me, or is everybody having this problem?
I was having trouble hearing as well.
wow. So can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm moving closer to the mic. Maybe that can help. So what I had just said, I'm a new member in the team, barely about 3 weeks old, and my core job will be working on the Mzima side, that is on the Android side.
Is anybody there?
Yes, we are here.
Yeah, I'm here. It looked like everybody, or a lot of people, dropped and then joined back up.
Okay. So I'm going to
Simon,
assume that everybody.
can we
Go ahead.
Simon, can we get you to try saying it a third time?
Sorry?
I don't know if that was Simon or Alfayo talking when everything disconnected.
Yeah,
Okay.
Simon was giving the introduction. Maybe Simon, I'm not so sure how far. Maybe you guys got him before we dropped off.
I just heard I have barely 3 weeks at AMPATH. That's the end of it. And then I didn't hear anything.
I heard that he was working with Ada. That's what I've heard.
Well, that's right. I'm working with Ada, and I've been here for about 3 weeks. And what I said, my core job will be working on Mzima, as and basically what I've done up to this point is to get to understand the status of the project and to help resolve issues here and there.
Okay. Great. Good to meet you, Simon.
Thank you.
So, Will, I just wanted to address some of the points that you were raising before. And I just needed to put it in a greater context of what AMPATH itself is heading towards. As you may or may not know, the current grant for AMPATH Plus ends in 2017, so in 2 years. The goals for us as a team somewhat depend on where the future will be in, let's say, 5 years from now, or 3 to 5 years. One question I keep asking myself is, how customized of a point of care system is it worth building based on those timelines? You know, basically, to do a good point of care system which really is tailored to the way that we do care, it'll take us at least a year to complete it. I mean, and really just a version 1.0. And if AMPATH is gone a year from now, does it really make sense to do that investment? And I don't mean gone, but if we're no longer supporting the HIV care program as we are right now. And I don't know what the answer is to that question. So that'll help me better understand what our real goals should be. Certainly the most simplest form of point of care that we can do is basically just remake our current InfoPath forms as HTML form entry forms, and really create no additional user interface and just teach whoever will be using the system how to find the right form and then how to enter it. That is definitely the simplest. I think that it would be a shame if that's all that we do, because essentially we provide no interface for how to really use information in the system. I know there are some tools available, but I think that they don't do a good enough job. But we can discuss that on another call. Personally, I would prefer customized flow to go through, which would go through a patient visit. And for that, we would use some combination of perhaps of HTML form entry plus some other way of doing it, whether it's through a module written in Java or doing it as a web application using something like Angular. And I think everybody knows my preference right now is to use Angular, although I'm not sold. I just submitted, I'm in the process of putting forth a work plan. It was discussed on Friday. The three core aspects of it were making this point of care system, providing some tools for data visualization, and coming up with some sort of scheme for allowing, well, what we're calling decentralization, but I'm not even sure what that really means in this context. But, you know, from a functional perspective, it means sites being able to view their own data and generate their own reports. The current budget that I put forth is going to be around $300,000. I have no idea where that money will come from, but we'll see. We had a call last Friday to get suggestions on how to move forward. It was somewhat emphatically suggested, especially by Joe Mamlin, that due to delays in our ability to hire developers for making these systems, that we initially hire, we do some sort of a subcontract with Regenstrief for maybe the first 6 months, while we're simultaneously trying to hire several, what I have in the budget as 3 additional developers to support the work. So right now, the way that I've been thinking about this, Willa, is those Regenstrief-based programmers, assuming those are even available, I've just kind of been assuming that they are there, will kind of help lay really the significant foundation of what our point of care system will look like. I imagine that with 6 months they should be able to do a pretty good job, but definitely would like to get feedback on that. And that the Kenya team that we're building will be mentored over hopefully they'll be hired within 3 months. That'll give them around 3 months of time with these Regenstrief developers. And they'll be mentored and taught how to do the system, but their main role will be to iteratively improve the system rather than kind of architect it. So I just giving you the background. I mean, I know that you were specifically asking for more kind of the technical plans of how we might go forward with point of care. I think that, it's so hard to say how we're going to do it unless we know the resources that are available to us. And I don't know where we should stand in terms of, maybe not where we should stand, but I don't have a good description right now in my head of what's the no resource option, and then what's the maybe a medium resource option, and what's the full resource option. So it might be that we want to come up with a few different contingency plans to support each of the various resource levels.
Yeah, I think there's some things we could be doing kind of up front that would help us in any path. And that one would be to say, I know we've talked about, and I thought over the last month or so, the forms team was working on trying to take some of the InfoPath forms and rebuild them in HTML form entry. Do we have any of our regular InfoPath forms working in HTML form entry yet?
Burke, the form team's working on the HIV return form and should be have a draft ready to look at by Friday, and then hopefully an even better draft after some input by next Friday. In terms of, I know HTML forms have been done in the past with form team collaboration. Let me look and see. That preceded me. Let me look real quick and see what forms we do have in HTML, and because it preceded me, I don't know what their functionality is right now, but I can at least look.
Yeah, I'm thinking that in the near term, we know pretty much any path we're going to want to switch away from InfoPath, and that being said, if we take one of our simpler forms, but still a little bit of a challenge, like the return visit form, and say, can that be done and be fully functional as an HTML form entry form without any programmer involvement, or is it going to take a little bit of additional, for if we want the validation the way we like it, or some other features to work a little differently than HTML form entry out of the box? Is there some JavaScript programming we need? If there's some tactical need to get to a workable, production-ready return visit form in HTML form entry, then that's something that we could be tackling sooner than later.
I think there's no question that there's going to be JavaScript validation that's going to have to be done. I mean, InfoPath is a pretty sophisticated software, and I know we're making use of some of that functionality. I'm not sure who's going to do that JavaScript programming. I mean,
I would guess it's going to be a developer.
Burke, maybe I could suggest something. So it seems like either way we're going to have to move to HTML form entry. That's fine. So what is the path down that road? I think, as per your suggestion, we can pick one form. I think you can pick like a return visit form. That's fine. And the form team should work with the dev team in order to make that happen. So what you can do is Sarah and her team design that form, and by the time they need some programmer input in order to create those JavaScripts and all, and then it will chip in, and then I think at the end we'll have a form that is working.
Yeah, from the developer team standpoint, I think you can pretty much guarantee that we're going to have N forms to do. It's not going to stop at one. And given that, we want to be thinking if we need to do validation, if there's features we need to do, if there's something very specific to the return visit form that's just a little hack, maybe that's just done in the return visit form. But if we are working on that first form and making, getting, say, the return visit form working, we would want to be mindful of how do we solve that in a way that when we're working on the nth form, it's not, n times the effort, but with the next form, if there's common validation steps that are needed, that we put those into a JavaScript file that we can share across forms, etc. Something like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a very good idea, actually. So you're suggesting? Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
The other piece, and I don't know if we've investigated it, that we could be doing sooner than later, regardless of which path we're taking, would be to investigate, what happens if we take the app framework and the UI framework, take those modules and put them on top of what we have in AMRS, and what issues arise with that. If we can get, if we're already on 1.9 of OpenMRS, so if we can layer on those modules and have a functioning system, it can continue to function very much like it is now, but that would open the door to using the OpenMRS 2 features that several implementations are now working on that are focusing very, very much on point-of-care solutions.
I mean, I guess maybe Willa can comment on his knowledge of these 2.0 modules, but we really have no bandwidth right now to be doing all that much experimentation. That's my concern.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't have the bandwidth to do it, then we can't do it. But if we're kind of basically waiting for as far as the development shop, waiting for some decisions and paths to be sorted out until we know kind of what the right thing to be doing next, there's a potential big win if we just move our platform forward, because there are several teams working on things like order entry solutions, and PIH is now focusing very much on creating that kind of clinical workflow and getting that into the system. And so there's an EMR API module that starts to do some higher level things, so that you don't have to code every, like if you're creating a visit or doing some of the kind of clinical functions are kind of pre-done. So anyway, I agree that we don't just abandon all, if we have a bunch of work that needs to be done for AMPATH, we don't abandon it to play with OpenMRS 2. But if we have time where we're sitting there kind of twiddling our thumbs waiting for a decision on which way are we going to go, I wouldn't mind putting some of our eggs in the basket of where Partners in Health and Bomni and Kenya EMR are all headed.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so that's an interesting suggestion. There is one thing I think we haven't addressed yet, and Jonathan, I thought we were going to get more people on the team. Is there anything that is being done about that right now that you know of?
So yes and no. I mean, we were in the process of trying to hire, I think, both a junior and senior developer over the past few months. My impression is that the salaries that we are offering are just not they're just not competitive. So on the one hand, you could say yes, they have been looking for people, but they're doing it in a way that basically assures that we won't hire anybody. So that's the no part. The other part to this is that yes, there is some money that has become available through the Regan Street Foundation, which I do not have control over. And it's unclear what percentage of that will go towards supporting developers. The current plan was to produce this budget, which I think I sent you a little while ago, Willa, and make a proposal to Batuka, and then see if we can get resources through AMPATH through AMPATH Plus, the grant, to support this. And I have no idea how long it will take to make decisions. So I think we have to operate right now under the assumption that our current capacity is you, me, and Alfayo, and Burke, as he is available.
Is it? Okay. Anyway. Yeah, so Jonathan and everybody else, as you can see, it seems like we can't be very optimistic about the kind of stuff we want to do, because there's all the things going on, the tickets. I think we're gonna have to be very careful on what you're planning to do. Otherwise, we'll be jumping from one thing to another without finishing any of those. So I think for now, the best way or the best course of action, as far as the POC is concerned, I agree with you, Jonathan. It would be just to stick to the way we can improve the HTML form entry, so that we can have that feature we discussed about last time, the previous time, with Bark and everybody else, saving the artifacts before propagating them to the database. And then from there, I think we can have a way of using that module on the tablet, as you suggested. Otherwise, trying to play around, yeah, it's good, but as we can see, we don't have much of resources. Yeah. There are a lot of things that
I mean, it's not just developer resources too. I mean, you know, essentially they're planning to reduce AMRS usage to 11 sites, which is actually the majority of the patients that we see, so it's not such a big change. But the numbers that I got today was that there's about 100 clinicians at these sites, which means that each one of them needs some device, whether it's a laptop or a tablet, to engage the system. I don't even know if there's resources for that. Not to get, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but I think for now, I'm in agreement with Burke, which is that we should be focused on making HTML form entry compatible forms. And then it would be, you know, I don't know what else needs to be done from a developer perspective, but I would love to see Alfayo dedicate some of his time to doing the JavaScript, coming up with the JavaScript validation scheme that is ideally generalizable from one form to the next. There will likely be some common validation functions that should be shareable. And perhaps all of us as a team could even spend the first, you know, a few days over the next week or two kind of coming up with an architecture for how to do this validation, because there's obviously many ways of doing it. It would be nice to use a tool like jQuery for validator and build on top of that, rather than just come up with our own completely de novo way of doing it.
Yeah, and to that end, it would help rather than just say in the abstract, come up with a validation, design for HTML form entry, which is a very broad and can go 1,000 different directions. To say, here's the form we have, and we need to do. I'm presuming, when it comes to collecting knobs or something like that, HTML form entry is going to have validation already. It's really going to be some of the across-field validation issues, and so to say, here's the form we have, here's the type of validation that HTML form entry can't do right now. Like these are, like if someone does this, we want to be able to let them know there's a problem, or if someone does that. So get to the specific need, and then say, okay, let's come up with a solution, or let's brainstorm on ideas of how we would architect the solution to get that working. So just a more concrete task rather than just do validation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I was kind of thinking the same way, and basically from there. So what I was about to say is, it's easy to do things iteratively, like we have the things, and then you solve it, and then you can refactor the code and say, okay, you know what, we did this in this, so that when you need this kind of validations, you can easily grab that code and create the way of using it in some other forms. Yeah, basically.
So
yeah.
So as a step that, so I think as developers we need to decide what framework we're going to use to do validation, and we can begin thinking about that. I think what would help us is if the forms team could review the each field, each question on the adult follow-up form, and identify the logic and produce some sort of document which is describing the field, ideally the tag name that they've come up with in the form, and the logic, some description of the logic that's being applied, because then we can start generalizing that into functions. The other truth is that I kind of just dumped like this project of building HTML forms on the forms team without giving any instruction whatsoever of how the form should look like, any sort of naming conventions for form names. So, I guess I'll have to find some time to spend with them. But Burke, is there any conventions that are currently existing that might help us with this for HTML form entry?
Yeah, that I don't know. I think in general, there's the elements that are provided out of the box, but in terms of putting IDs on divs or anything like that, that's all left up to the user. So I don't know that there are conventions. We could easily ask. There are many people, many people using HTML form entry around the world, and so that would be a good question to bring up on the implementers list, and just say, hey guys, we're do have those folks who are seasoned HTML form entry users, have you come up with a convention? And in fact, that's something that we could easily ask for. They're trying to come up with ideas for OpenMRS University, which happens pretty much right now, like an hour after we started this call. So what time is it now? It's, in 15 minutes. There's an OpenMRS University. This week they're going to be talking about, I forget, Daniel was going to be, I think they're talking about how to use the OpenMRS 2 and versus the OpenMRS platform. But that's a side note for us right now. But we could use that same hour following this call and say, hey, can we get the OpenMRS community to basically give us a quick developer tutorial on HTML form entry and best practices, and that's available to us. I'm sure we could talk Mark Goodrich into essentially giving us an hour-long class in HTML form entry development.
Burke, can I humbly ask that you take the lead on that? Do you have the time?
Yeah. I'll reach out to Mark and the folks that are managing Open Emerson University and say, hey, would that work? The time, that's 9 o'clock, so that's 3, what is that? That's 5 o'clock right now in Kenya. So 5 to 6 time. I know that's not the best time in Kenya for the developers, but we could probably try to record it as well. But that's, I'll talk to Mark, see if we can't get an update on, or just kind of a tutorial for best practices in developing.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah, Jonathan.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about your suggestion that the forms team should go through all the fields and try to come up with some documentation on the kind of validations that are applied to that field. And I was thinking maybe that's a very long way of doing things, and probably we could just do the way we suggested before. Like they should just we've already decided that we're going to work on this return visit form. If we can just work as a team on that form, I'm sure we're going to learn a lot, and by the time we're done with that, it's going to be very easy for us to take that kind of experience and apply it into other forms. That's just the way I think about it. I mean, just waiting for the team to go through the form, come up with the field and documentation, and I don't know. I don't really think it's going to work nicely for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we probably could land somewhere between there and say, if they're getting to a point where they're going to have kind of a first pass at it by the end of this week, then we could sit down with them at the beginning of next week and say, hey, let's take someone who has worked with the
you're gone.
The follow-up and have them. What's that?
Oh, you are breaking up, Bennett. You're back.
Sorry.
Yeah.
If we took someone who was working very closely with the InfoPath form, and said, okay, sit down with this form that has now been recreated in HTML form entry. Even take one of the data assistants that is doing data entry and say, now look at this HTML version of it. Tell us what are the things that would stop you from being able to use it. What are the validation steps? What are the features that are missing from this compared to what you're used to? And that could in a sitting down for a half an hour or an hour probably point out where a lot of the technical issues are.
That sounds good, Burke. I think we're also all going to be together next week, which is good timing.
Perfect.
Good point.
I think it's optimistic that we'll be able to figure this out in half an hour, an hour. Having kind of done this for the outreach forms so far, it's trickier than it might seem. So either way, the forms team needs to start identifying the questions that have more complicated logic. They don't necessarily have to make some sort of a document, but they need to be pointing that out to us, and then we can start thinking about, we can start asking the follow-up questions of what's really needed.
Yeah, JJ, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to suggest that I thought we could get a comprehensive discussion in half an hour or an hour, but I wouldn't be the least bit surprised that if someone sat down with that HTML form entry version, that within half an hour, they could point out 10 things that it's missing, that are technical things that are going to require some development.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, like what Mark said, I think the idea is to have that process as one of the things that will be done in order to have that form working perfectly, or maybe close to perfectly. So yeah, I think it's a good idea having to sit down with one of the data entry clerks and see them pointing out. You can be surprised the kind of things the data entry clerks is going to point out that you would probably miss if you don't do that. So yeah, I guess you're on the same page.
Good point, Willa, about the data entry clerks.
Yeah.
They're very knowledgeable.
All right, so just as a tentative plan, Sarah, if you can just start keeping track of the questions and at least just being able to identify which of them have logic that's not just related to the question itself, but might because there's a dependence on another question. So,
yes,
for example, the things that I'm concerned about are not making sure that the blood pressure is within a valid range, because I think that that's not hard to do. It's, you know, if a patient says that they're on ARVs, then they have to have a corresponding drug order that makes sense with.
Right. That makes sense to me. We can document that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's likely going to be a space where we're going to need to do technical add the validation. That's for sure. But as you get the first pass of, hey, here's our first pass of the remote form entry form, I think any of the highlight issues, like any of the things in terms of that are kind of major issues you see with, okay, well, now we can see it coming to life in HTML form entry, but it doesn't do this and this and this and this that we rely on AMPATH for, whether that's multiple field validation or something else, even just behavior of the form, being able to just know what is the top 5 things or 10 things that jump to your mind, or jump on a list of these are missing so far in the HTML form entry, and we can figure out pretty quickly, are those things that just can be done with an HTML form entry and we just need to learn how to avail ourselves of them, or are they things that we need to be adding on top of it?
And perhaps again, on the same note, it will be good for the team to also learn the various tags that are there within the HTML form entry, because like yesterday I learned a number of things that I never knew existed when we were working with some. So it will be good. I don't know whether there is, I haven't checked whether there is any documentation that maybe one could look at the various aspects that have been already considered in HTML form entry. And then in addition to that, maybe we have had experience in like the X forms. There are questions that when we were doing some other steps, they were found to be very challenging. Perhaps maybe as they work on those issues that you think would be of a challenge in HTML, we could also consider such scenarios that we had in a number of questions in the previous forms, perhaps that I dealt with some time back.
Thanks, Simon. There's a lot of HTML form entry documentation, including information about tags that other people have used in the past, and lots of examples on the OpenMRS wiki. So not the AMPATH wiki, but the OpenMRS wiki. Oh, I'm sorry, Alfio. Sorry, that was Alfio, not Simon. I apologize.
Thanks, all of that. Perhaps it's good for the developers or the forms team. At least we should be able, I haven't really done much with the HTML form entry. I've just been looking at the forms, and it seems to be interesting to work with those forms. I'll be glad as well to be part of when we are doing those developments, so that at least we see what else we can, whether there are any challenges. Perhaps I'll take a look at that field and see whether the issues that maybe are on top of my mind, or what maybe will be a challenge, whether it's still a challenge or whether it has already been handled in some way or another.
Yeah, we've been discussing about this for quite some time now, and I think we still have other things on the agenda list. Maybe we should move, guys. And we don't have much time anyway, so I think we should move, right?
All right.
I think Willa had mentioned a number of stuff on the items that we have not discussed. Don't know whether there are any contribution on the remote entry. We had remote entry and Mzima, and eventually we had oncology. I'm not so sure whether we still need to, whether there are any additional comments on those items. There seem not to be any comments on other items. Any ideas on the remote form entry and Zima?
Yeah, well, I think, like I said, that is maybe it is the best course of action right now in order to avoid all these problems the IT team is going through. Then I'll just, when we are done with the HTML form entry, I'll have to look at the code in remote form entry. Unless, Alpha, you're not doing anything now that takes a lot of your time, you can take a look at that code and see how we can modify it so that we let the processing happening in the remote sites and then have the remote form entry save those files to be reprocessed again at the central site. Is that something that you can do, Alpha?
Yes, I'll be glad to do that.
I think that change to remote form entry should be fair. Real issue will be the real challenge with that will be sitting down with the IT folk or to be sure that when it comes to data in the system, other than user by form entry, patients, observations, encounters. If we have any other processes that of what the internal ID is, we need to be aware of that, hopefully up front. But I think that, as Jonathan JJ has pointed out, the focus right now is kind of try to get access to the central server for kind of point of care, remote operations to the extent we can. Invest months of work on remote form entry, but my guess is that this is a relatively small change. It's just adding one step at the time that we submit a form and saying, don't just save it in this directory, copy it to that directory. And so that should be relatively small, but it could have big ramifications if we're not careful. If we start doing that and the remote sites start loading data in, they'll be, they'll have data locally, but if it starts to major that we didn't anticipate.
I'm going to throw a wrench into all of this right now too, and I still think that Angular is a better way to do this. I'm just
I agree, Angular.
So I want to also just put in
we all agree that
a coda that if we can convince enough people at the OpenMRS conference to jump on board, maybe we can start considering a Angular form entry, because it just well, whatever. We don't have to discuss that, but just to make it more complicated.
Yeah, but I think we all agree, and that the challenge right now is that I think it's even less of an issue, the issue of the you know, even if the data were at the remote sites, would the remote sites feel like they had any more access to it? Maybe not. But the thing that concerns me is if our IT team is spending an inordinate amount of time trying to, because remote form entry is broken, trying to bring data to remote sites, and they're doing that all manually through SQL and just spending a lot of time with that. And there's a small afternoon change we can make the remote form entry to eliminate that. That would be that's, to me, that's the value of considering it, is if the IT team is already, we know they're already strapped, and then they're doing a lot of work that's really unnecessary. That's where I think a tweak to remote form entry might help us in the short term.
So we have an agreement, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't work on the remote form entry thing until we understood from Mincha, are they in fact spending lots of time getting data to remote sites, or are there issues, major issues that are happening because the data aren't getting to remote? If those are the case, then the question would be, if we made this change and allowed the data to get processed locally, or at the remote site, would that make things even worse than they are right now, or would it help? If we find out that they're spending a lot of effort or it's causing major problems, that they don't have the data at remote sites, and processing at the remote site wouldn't cause any big problems, then it's probably worth investing an afternoon to fix remote form entry so that it does that.
The only issue, Burke, is that right now the kind of only use for data is for the production of reports. Like, the clinicians aren't going to AMRS to ask questions, and I don't think that's related to whether the data is in there or not, although it could play a role. And I don't think right now that we have the capacity to produce reports on the local servers. For one, because the data, all the data quality work right now is only done centrally. And two, I don't even know if there's, I don't think there actually is the ability to produce the reports through a module. I think it's all done through SAS code right now.
Yeah, JJ, what we need to understand is Miencha suggested that they're spending a lot of time manually getting data out to remote sites. If there's no need to do that whatsoever, then why are they spending the time? If it's not necessary, then maybe we should talk to IT and say, stop wasting your time doing that. If maybe I misunderstood them and they're not even doing that, then problem solved.
Well, yeah, I mean, they do it. They only do it once a month, or maybe twice a month. So they're not spending that much time. I mean, they pull data in more frequently from remote to central. They just don't send it back so frequently because it takes a lot of time. I mean, what I think Miencha really wants is just a system that allows them to access, cleaned data and to produce the reports. Without there being a lot of work, but and he's fulfilling that responsibility of doing the updates because as far as he's been told, and I don't know exactly where the rules came down for this, but he's been told to do that, so that's why he does it.
So, Jonathan, you are saying that there is no need to modify the remote form entry to allow the processing of information, the data at the remote sites?
I mean, the one advantage is that if clinicians happen to want to review data that's been entered but not processed, so generally data that's less than a month old, probably in some cases less than 2 weeks old. That's the use case right there, and I don't know how often that happens. I don't think that will fix Miencha's problem, because either way, you're still going to send the clean data back to the site.
Okay. Well, we can make sure that Miencha knows that that's an option, and and if he agrees with Jonathan that it's not it's not going to really help, then we shouldn't spend any time on it.
I guess maybe another way of saying it is that I don't think it will change his need to keep doing what he's doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the question would be is that if he could focus on, instead of trying to get all data for that site out to the site, and it was just, let's look from Central what data has been edited in the last month, it might be a smaller task. But
yeah. Okay.
But
well,
anyway, I mean, we don't need to spend, it would probably take less time than this discussion to make the change to remote form entry. So we can
well, then
decide
I think
when
we
and
should
if
do
we
it.
want to do it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so I'm not sure whether, so what I'm gathering from this discussion is we need to talk to Miencha and see what he's going through and whether it is worth changing the module or not, right?
I mean, I think we should get Miencha's input. I don't think that's going to change the result. Yeah. I mean, if Burke says that it only takes an hour to fix, then I see no reason.
I mean, it's literally in Java code. We're writing a file out to the file system, and the question is do you write it to a folder or do you write it to 2 folders?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's not a big change from our standpoint, but it also could cause major headaches for him. So we should just set it aside. We should make sure that he's aware that it's an option. And if he says, oh, that would save me a ton of time, he can talk to JJ, sort it out, and they can decide, is it a good idea or not? If it is, let's spend an hour and let's fix it. If he says, no, that would make my life, wouldn't help at all, or it would just make things worse, then we don't bother with it.
Okay.
Thanks for the comments on the remote form entry. Now we look at the Mzima. We spend a few minutes on that. Mzima. I'm not so sure whether we have someone with the information with regard to what Willa was asking in reference to Mzima at this point.
Yeah, I think we need to understand what our goals are with Mzima. I know that they're piloting some projects with it. I know from JJ's perspective, creating some simple web apps and wanting to get them into end users' hands. If Mzima is actually coming to life in terms of getting used by clinicians in the field, or being used in the field successfully, then one thing I could see is that, well, could we tweak it to allow a not just forms, but allow an app to be run, so that we don't have to worry about how to deliver apps and deal with that whole process that would be solved by Mzima. But I guess first and foremost, we need to know kind of what we're doing. I know there's like specific grants that or projects that are planning to use Musema. I don't know where those are or what the I just don't I don't want to have us work on Musema just to work on Musema. It needs to be work on Musema for some specific goal.
Yeah, I agree with Burke. I mean, I don't know the history of Musema either. I think that it's an excellent idea. I think that right now it's not, I feel like it's not exactly sure what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
and as a result,
my impression is that they are working toward having a deliverable for the implementers conference. So we may have, we may get to see and have a different feel for what Musema is after, in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, guys, I think we're not having the right people to discuss this Musema thing, because if probably Ada was on this call, that would have been very helpful, but she's not here, and the core Musema devs are not here either. So I think maybe we should just leave that one for now. Maybe next time if we can invite guys, then you can have a better discussion than this one.
Yeah, I would. From what I've seen, I mean, hopefully they're planning on making it open source and unveiling, and showing some functionality by the implementers conference in a couple weeks, and then we can see exactly what this Musema thing is and how we could use it.
Yeah, and it probably will stop being a black box to us.
Yep.
Okay.
So the next item, I'm not so sure whether you guys have the time to go through all agenda items. The other items that were listed on the agenda, if you do have, then we can continue. So the next item is the dashboard based on Hub Zero. Maybe will give us some insights on that.
Did you say my name, Alpha?
Yes, sir. I said I see the next agenda item in the dashboard based on Hub Zero.
Yeah, okay, Hub Zero dashboard, right. So we've had a discussion with Brock regarding this as well. And Brock, yeah, the email you sent me, I tried to look on those things, and it seems like it is exactly similar with what Anne and her team are doing. So I don't know about you guys, but what is the feel? Do we really think we should go ahead with this Hub Zero project the way it is right now?
My impression is learning that, initially we were talking about having a contract with AC and then getting some deliverables, and that while Ada still sounds like, and I didn't respond to her email earlier, but while Ada sounds like she still thinks we're moving forward with a contract, what I heard from AC was basically, we'll give you these things and no intent to get contracted. So that leaves us with, well, is the work that AC's team has built, is it worth the effort of us installing it compared to just being able to do it? And what does it, is it valuable enough in terms of the work they've done for us to install it, given that there's very little documentation or we'd be able to ask them questions, but it'd be getting someone's legacy code and trying to use it. Willa made the point that they're really using jQuery data tables, and when you look at jQuery data tables, it provides nearly all the functionality that that they've got. And so it raised the question of, well, is this something that if we wanted this functionality, is this something that we could do ourselves in the same or less time than it would take to set up their environment? So I thought it was worth at least looking at data tables and saying, well, is that something that that we could, is the difference between what data tables provides and what they're saying they can provide us, make it worth going through the effort of getting something set up? I don't know. I mean, given that they are saying, hey, we'll set it up for you, it's not really a cost to us. It's basically just, create an environment and let them do their thing. So maybe it's not a bad thing just to have that running as an option.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Brooke said, Ada, we need some confirmation whether this is for free or not. My impression was that it was as well. In addition to the jQuery, there is some PHP, which looks like it's pretty easy to do. And I actually think most of the work for us will be kind of doing the PHP stuff, basically copying and pasting into the format that we want. And I think, it basically does what we want it to do. Although I think that the whole issue is that what we want it to do is going to change over time. So I think we definitely let them, if they're doing this for free, we definitely let them install the components, and we'll see if we can make them do what we need them to do.
Yeah, I guess that's very reasonable. It's reasonable. Like, okay, let them do it for free. If we don't like it, we just get rid of it, right?
Yeah, that's presuming that we're not spending a lot of time setting up the environment. So I think to that end, I think in all that, taking the Hub 0 that we've got, or creating that, and then giving it to them, letting them configure it. We do that. Worry a lot about being able to make it, a recipe in Docker that we can recreate. We can build it and we can have them configure it, and we can see, do we end up using it or not? If we end up using it and start to rely on it a bit, maybe we want to make it a little more robust. If we find out that with a little bit of investment on our part, we can actually do the same or more with data tables, then we may say, okay, thanks for setting that up, but we're going a different direction.
Okay, so you're still suggesting that we should do it in Docker?
Well, I definitely wouldn't have them install it directly onto the ETL machine, because then we've got mysterious changes to a machine that is the base machine. We could if we wanted to give them access to a virtual machine, we could do that. Yeah, we already have a Docker instance, and if the ETL server has Docker installed on it, then we should be able to just give them do that. It's easy.
Yeah, either way, I was thinking virtual machine, but if Docker seems to be a better option, yeah, that's fine, I guess.
Did you see the New York Times article about Docker?
No, I didn't.
they just did like a little feature on it. They've raised $65 million.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they, the whole notion of just putting things in containers. Once you've played with it a little bit, it's basically virtual machines, but it's virtual machines without all the heavy weight of virtual machines. So.
Yeah, except if you're running it on Windows.
Well, on Windows or Mac, you have a little virtual machine, but even then, it's still lighter weight because I have VMware or I have VirtualBox, and even though Docker creates a very small, lightweight virtual machine within VirtualBox to function on Mac, it's still creating new Docker images is much lighter weight than it would be creating a virtual machine for each.
Yeah, that's because Docker is already running on the virtual machine, and when you're creating the images, it is Docker. It's not a virtual machine.
Yeah. As compared to my virtual machines that each take 20 gig of my hard drive and a significant amount of resources to start up and take down.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. I know you love Docker back, so it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, based on this article that I read, it seems like it may be Docker or somebody else, but VMs are going to go in these container.
Yeah, the container-based approach is going to win. It's very clear.
I think it already won.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of use of virtual machines now. So, but yeah. Anyway.
Okay. Good.
I'm going to email Ada. I'm going to respond to her request about us talking about AMPATH Hub so that we decide on what to work on with AC. I'm going to clarify that with her over email. I'll make sure that I think Jonathan's on this. Yeah, everybody.
Thank you, Bud.
Sure.
Also, for everybody applying for visas to Mozambique, you need a yellow fever vaccination card or a copy of it.
Yeah.
You have it.
I've got mine. How is the yellow fever? Is that just once, or does it have to be done? Does it have to be repeated?
I mean, the latest guidelines is that you just need it once, but
yeah,
that's a recent change. It used to be once every 10 years.
That's what. Yeah,
or you
where
just
I was
go
confused.
the Sarah Ellen Mamlin approach and make your own vaccination card.
Depends on some countries. Some countries like once every 2 years. I mean, if your vaccination is older than 2 years, then they won't let you in.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
I saw that they normally just make you buy one and give it to you at the border. They don't normally.
Yeah, they make some money on it.
Oh, they just want money. And they want some use for their dirty needles.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring your own needle. All right. Do we have other things on the agenda? I know it's getting late for Kenya folks.
Oh, it is getting late. Yeah, I think you can defer this to the next call maybe, because there are so many of them. They are pretty general anyway, so yeah, I guess we touched most of the stuff that matters for now. So yeah, we can take this to the next call. That's what I was hoping.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Simon, welcome to the team.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, from now on, I think we should do whatever Simon says.
Yeah, sure. Simon, what did you say? What should we do?
Do they play Simon Says in Kenya as children?
No. But there's a story about one day.
Yeah, when we're children in the U.S. as kids, we have a game called Simon Says, and one kid stands in front of a group of them, and they say, "Okay, Simon says, put your hand on your head. Simon says, put your, clap. Simon says do this, and then they'll say now smile, and anybody who does something that Simon didn't say to do it then loses. So Simon says that's the rule. Whatever Simon says goes.
Yeah.
Simon says
All right.
the group.
Okay.
All right. We'll talk to you later. Cheers.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.